Here at Media Trust Group, we're celebrating women's gargantuan efforts towards making the world a better and safer place to live in for all.
We acknowledge and appreciate the fact that women are excellent,
resilient, courageous,
elegant,
creative,
passionate, dedicated,
and extraordinary multitaskers.
As a media group, we remain strongly committed to gender inclusion and diversity. And we do this because
this is
the right thing to do.
So please, join us in honoring and celebrating all the amazing women across the world on this International Women's Day.
From all of us at Daily Trust,
Trust TV, Armenia, and all other Media Trust brands.
We say Happy Women's Day!
All right, welcome back. It's no longer news that today is the International Women's Day and everyone is celebrating, including the Media Trust Group. Now, the 2023 International Women's Day is celebrated every March 8 in honor of women's contribution to society, economy, culture, and politics. It's also an occasion to consider the steps taken towards achieving gender equality in all spheres of life and the work that remains to be done. The 2023 day with the theme Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality points that women make up only 22% of artificial intelligence workers globally. We have in the studio to discuss this the President Association of Women Town Planners, Mrs. Yinka Bello. You're welcome to the studio.
Morning. Thank you for having me here.
We also have an entrepreneur and politician, Mrs. Dorothy Nuhu. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay.
Well,
happy International Women's Day to both of us.
Happy International
Women's Day to us as well.
And I can see the touch of purple on your outfit.
Absolutely.
And yours too. Very colorful.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a special day indeed. As a he for she, let me go first with the questioning. A lot really has happened in the past few years as far as women inclusion and women's participation in all spheres of our national life. Let me start with political issues. We've seen a decline, however, between the number of women that participated in the 2019 election and that of the 2023 presidential election in terms of the number of female candidates aspiring for positions and all that. And eventually, in the outcome of the 2023 elections, we've seen further that I think, for instance, the senators, for the women that were in the seat, I think virtually all of them are not returning to the Senate. How does that make you feel? Is that a setback?
It's a setback, and I'm not surprised because each progress draws equivalent measure of backlash. So the more we are progressing, the more backlash we are getting. And the backlash, manifests in different ways and impacts on how much women participate in politics. It is not for lack of effort, not at all, because the primaries showed that there were more women coming out for positions, but the insecurity in most of the men in politics would not, provide for us an enabling environment for women to emerge. And so there were very vicious efforts within parties to wriggle out women on the perception that women don't have enough resources to support the kind of work that goes on in politics. And so men who show, the affluence part of themselves much more than women do, even though I understand sometimes they are borrowing Land Cruisers and G-Wagons to move around. We will catch up because we now know that those things happen. But those are the kind of things that, caused parties to grow cold feet, when it came to presenting women as candidates. They needed candidates with what they call adequate resources, to fuel the campaign and elections and post-elections because of the legal tribunal issues that will ensue afterward. They have to be sure that candidates have the resources. What they are not thinking about is pulling those resources together to support women's participation you know, because there is nothing wrong with telling the men, yes, we know you got the money, but we have quality here. Can we put down some percentage?
Special concessions for women in terms
free
of
forms.
buying, the forms.
That is a tip of the iceberg. Everybody talks about that.
Okay, Mrs. Bello. My first question is, why is it that we're still here? Every year, March 8th, we talk about Women's Day. We celebrate. We have talk shops. There's a lot of talks. There's a lot of, you know, people, even the men, they come there and make promises. Why are we still here? Because in this particular election, in the presidential election, for instance, we had just one woman, and I don't hear her name be mentioned among the front runners. Why are we still here?
I think basically what is still affecting us is these cultural norms that we have, that is still existing. You know, we're living in an area that the men are seen to be the head, and then women are supposed to be submissive. So naturally there's this carryover of this mentality, even for those that are still educated. So women are constantly having those challenges, meeting up. And some cultures don't even think that a woman is, the voices of the women are not loud. They cannot talk to them, they cannot take instructions from them. So even when women have their ideas about things, they don't think it can work. And just like she mentioned, resources for us are basically one of the challenges. The more funds, resources you have in your hands, the more you can achieve a lot of things. And that resources is something we are not having access to. And that is what is happening in the political atmosphere.
Do you think there's a deliberate attempt by, you know, to just keep women in a certain space? Do you think so?
Absolutely, I think so. Because there should be a standard whereby a certain percentage of whatever position should be given to women, and it should not even be contested. But even for the ones that they tell us that no, we are going to give the women, the men are also, canvassing for the same thing.
Exactly.
They are canvassing
during
the same thing.
There was somebody canvassing for the women's seat in Adama or Taraba State.
So the
women.
Yeah. We have seen some states also where a man is the commissioner for women affairs.
It has happened in Niger State before.
And you know the beauty about this is the women they have a lot of creative ideas. We have the potential to manage, and you know, in managing, you will manage not only the resources that will help the society itself, but even human management, human resources management. And unfortunately, the other gender parts they're a bit reserved in giving us that opportunity to also manage the human aspect of these resources.
Okay.
Now, like I said, it's all still within this our cultural norm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, do you think there's anything peculiar about the 2023 elections in terms of female participation in politics? Is there anything different? Why have we seen the kind of decline that we've seen? You know, is it violence? What exactly are some of the factors that have perhaps led to this decline?
I think that, you know, today is digital.
Yeah, digital.
We can't underplay the role of the digital era in the women's participation in politics. It means that the people who have the resources have access to the most sophisticated ICTs and can employ experts in that field. I haven't seen ICT deployed anywhere in politics like it was in these 2023 elections, especially towards the presidential elections. We saw the measure of online propaganda, the video editing, the all sorts of cut and paste things that were being forwarded. They had such gifted people that they must have paid astronomically for to carry out this job and sustain it all the way through. Every time you opened your internet, it was bombardment of one form of propaganda after the other. No wonder we didn't hear about our sister much, who was just the single female candidate, because it takes a lot of resources to put the ICTs in place, to put a whole hall filled up with experts who are busy doing
media influencers.
So for me, that was the influencers, but also the creators of the content, because most of those contents were not facts. Some of them were just fictitious, but they were pushed into the public space as though they were the truth. If the woman had the capacity to pull that kind of resource together, the thing would have been different. So for me, if there is anything unique about what has happened in this season, it has been the use of the ICTs. And so I think that today's celebration is really hitting the nail on the head, because we must begin to ensure that women have the capacity, that women have access to the infrastructure, that women have access to resources to be able to afford what their male counterparts were able to put together to run a successful campaign.
All right, Mrs. Bello, she talked about resources, and it's huge. It's a huge component of the entire process. But where do we begin? Because even where you see women in business, most of them are in the small and medium scale businesses, which cannot really give them that kind of resources to actively participate and make a headway in politics. So where do we begin? Because you can't wait until during the election. You have to build. So how do we begin?
I think basically it starts from sensitization. We cannot, we need to talk more about getting more and more women, children, girls, more informed about the things that are happening. And this year's theme covers it all, the application of digital technology. And that is what is happening in the world now. 80% of people all over Nigeria, you see them with one form of digital technology, as small as smartphone. So the use of smartphone is one of the major things that can help us in sensitizing, and how we can do that through education. We should create platform whereby women and girls can have access to this information, because knowledge is power.
And I was also going to say, even when you say knowledge is power, it's not just about the women getting educated, but there are certain areas that we don't see a lot of women venturing into, like the ICT, that is a theme for this year.
And just imagine that we have the Android phone. You open your Facebook and 1,000 men are asking you, where are you located? You look beautiful. Absolutely. Can we be friends? When do I see you? Meanwhile, we can do much more than looking for dates on the phone.
Absolutely.
And so we need to begin to reconstruct how we engage with the new technologies in terms of communication. That has to be done. Let's know that when we are online, we are not there to look for dates. We are there for business. And so we can begin to look at the facilities that they provide and how we can best utilize them to our advantage in terms of pushing the envelope and in terms of occupying or reclaiming spaces.
Yes, and I also think why we need to start this early, we can go as to the to the basic, as going to the primary school, starting them young, sensitizing them, educating them. There are different platforms which you can use to even, not necessarily on-site education. If you see now these days, people go through Zoom virtually to educate. During the COVID time, a lot of people leveraged on the use of internet to achieve a lot of things. And if we women seize the opportunity by educating these young ones, especially the females, right from primary and secondary school, sometimes it doesn't even have to be. It can be a virtual meeting. It can be through webinar where they can have some of this sensitization information of what they can do in the society as a whole. Themselves,
Well, before you even get to what these women can do as in the society, there's a UN report that came out yesterday that said that Nigeria is among the 12 countries that are hard hit by women undernourished women, girls and women between the ages of 19 and 49 are undernourished. So we're talking about people who don't even have enough food, they're not eating well. I think that should form the basis before we talk about education and every other thing. And now we're battling this.
I think that all these things are interconnected, and we don't have to do one before we do the other. We can do everything at the same time because of the intersectionalities that play out.
A hungry girl, will she want to go to school though?
She wants to go to school, and she can be fed that she's going to school, and while in school. That happened during our time, during the federal government colleges, where there were model schools. They did everything for us, and that's why I think people in our generation are pretty much like well-rounded in terms of education and skills and capacity and exposure, you know, and understanding even of the context of the nation. I think that we have enough resources to be able to take it all at the same time, and we must begin then to put pressure on the leadership to ensure that resources are allocated to the right things, for the right things to be done. This gender tracking of the budget, we need to scale it up to the finer details so that we ensure that women in their reproductive age, for goodness sake, is the statistic that you've given us, are well nourished. Because if in their reproductive age they are malnourished, then we are going to have other complications, you know, spiraling from there. So we have to look at it in an, in an interconnected manner.
Okay. Now, earlier on, you talked about young women, the use of social media and smartphones by young women, and all that. And I'm thinking to ask this: that in terms of self-awareness among these young women themselves, sometimes you find that they themselves do not see the tool that they have in their hands, the smartphones, as something that they can make something much more meaningful for themselves, rather than just posting pictures of them, showing off
selfies,
how beautiful they are, and the rest of
my
them.
new style.
I mean, exactly. So, I mean, they are basically just showing off themselves, and for the men, well, it's just an opportunity to get a date and the rest of them. So. Do these young women really understand? Are they that aware of themselves such that they actually can see the smartphones in their hands as something that they can make life much more meaningful for themselves beyond just, Well,
let me start by saying my sister, Mrs. Bello, was saying that we need to start educating these young women. It comes from there. She also mentioned the issue of socialization. Women have been objectified from birth. And so they grow up with this mentality, about let's make the men happy, let's show off, or, we are all supposed to look dressy and wear the best smiles, Hardly we are seeing selfies of people in the cockpit, they're trying to take off the plane, or in a boardroom governing over a meeting and so on. We need those selfies, but that comes with awareness creation. That comes with deconstructing what has been put in our heads while we were being brought up, and putting in place of that deliberately information, education, and capacity that enables us realize that we are much more than our physical bodies.
Absolutely.
We are spiritual, we have inner strength and energy, we have capacity to create and be innovative, and we can bring all of these on the table, and that can propel our development altogether in a much faster way. And we need to begin to make women feel like they are agents of change and not just beneficiaries or subjects. Let's do this for them, let's do that for them. We can do it together. I'm telling you that there are girls that you put in the classroom and give them one session on how to use the phone to send out adverts for fashion designers, for example. You'll be very surprised at what they can do with it. And so I think that we need to just start revisiting the way we are brought up, what we think of our bodies, the kind of targets and goals that we've been taught to achieve, and begin to operate outside the box. Let's leave those straight jackets and sew our own jackets and move with them.
All right,
point.
There's the issue of culture, and you have mentioned that. The culture, the African culture, Nigeria culture, we do know that there are some societies where the women are supposed to be seen, not heard. So there's this issue that is there. So it's underlying every other thing that you talk about on the surface. So how do you get to the root of this particular tackling the culture which has existed for so long and has formed how women are brought up, as it were, in most societies in Nigeria?
I think, you know, I heard when you made the statement about socialization and starting from the community level, but you also said we need to bring men on the table, you know, so that we can have these conversations. Because if the man is brought up and fueled to function in a particular way, and he's going to continually interact with women, and we don't deconstruct his own perception and upbringing, then we're still going to have a problem. Like in politics, I see many men who say, oh, I support the woman in politics. Oh, I would vote for a woman if she was a candidate. But you know what? His mates are going to tell him, oh, woman rapper, all you want to do is to support women. And, you know, so they call them names, they stigmatize them.
On that note, I would like to bring in Mrs. Bello. I think that one way they have criticized women is that when women talk about empowering women and making the lives of women different, they don't talk about it with the men in the room. They talk about it amongst themselves, forgetting that they need the men on the table to key into it for them to succeed. For instance, when the bills on the women bills that were killed on the National Assembly, we heard that the women, the person who brought the bill and the women did not lobby enough to get their male counterpart on board. When the men want these things, they lobby their men and the women.
You know, aside from women supporting women to achieve their aim, we should have the mindset of collaboration, because the truth is that we're in a society that consists of both, representation of the male and the female, and in as much as we agree on doing some certain things, we need their involvement. And this is where politics also comes in. Women need to understand how to play the politics. If we don't know how to play the politics and be diplomatic, most of the times we'll not get what we want. For instance, in our association, Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, we have a couple of the women wing, that is association, the national body, Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. They have things that they want to do, but we felt that in our little way, we can go into intervention projects that can impact the national body and will give us a voice. And that's what we've been doing. And we are not doing it in isolation. How do we do it? The first person we have to consult will have to be the national president.
Who is a man?
Who is a man. We must get them to be on board. Let them know, see where we're going to, what is share our vision with them. And so we cannot do things in isolation. We must get them involved. Let them see what we have. And again, we must have something tangible to offer. Sometimes if you come, we present things to them like we're in competition with them, they might track it down. But when they see something tangible that we want to do for the society, I think it's not all of them that can can reject our proposal. But at the same time, you see one or two people that will support us. So we need diplomacy. We need also to imbibe the act of politics. Yes.
Okay, another group very critical to this conversation is the religious leaders. So let's talk about the role of religious leaders in deconstructing some of the narratives and some of the ideas about women participating in other aspects of life in our country. What role can religious leaders play?
Plenty roles, because most of us are affiliated to one religion or the other, and especially women. If you go to places of worship, if you check your list, you're going to find women who are totally immersed in religious activities. And that is a very good platform to do the education, to begin to address the discriminatory practices. The challenge is, do these teachers themselves know what we are talking about? That's a big issue. How are they interpreting the texts, the religious books? It's a big challenge. So there has to be a deliberate effort, also an investment in capacity building for religious leaders to understand the issues. There are religious leaders who would see a woman being battered on a daily basis and they will still tell her, no, you know, you have to be submissive. Like, to what point? It's just like saying women have not lobbied enough. To what point? Where is the yardstick for the measurement of lobby that we are expected to do? You know, so we need to get the religious leaders training tool altogether prepared. I don't think that we've done very well coming to think about this religious, a tool for training religious leaders. We need a group that will come up with that sort of tool, that will put them through the various components of women's lives and get them to relate them with the religious texts and let them not mix culture with religion anymore, because we see that happening over and over again.
Because there's a lot of narratives really that stem from the interpretation that religious leaders give to certain texts in scriptures, in religious books, you know, regarding the way women are expected to behave in a society and all that.
Yes, like the text can be interpreted in so many ways. Well, some of the ways is that women are meant to keep quiet and listen to what the men says, even in church. But I don't want to focus on what the Bible says or what the Quran says, but we have an opportunity of this religious institution to educate and leverage it. I discovered that it's a great platform. If you're a member of a church and your pastor is affiliated to a particular political individual, there's a tendency of encouraging the members of the congregation to be in support of the person you want. So it's a great platform that we need to explore, that can be deployed to sensitizing even the role of women and how they can impact the society.
All right.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we cannot go further because of time. We thank you for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives with us on this subject.
Thank you very much. And happy Women's Day to everyone once again.
Once again, yes. Our guest has been President, Association of Women Town Planners, Mrs. Yinka Bello, and also entrepreneur and politician, Mrs. Dorothy Nuhu. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short breather. We are not done just yet. And when we return, we'll take a look at some other perspectives to the same issue. It's International Women's Day. Join us again.